A sword is coming down on a seated man's head. The seated man does not stand. He does not draw. He does not move his feet. He lifts from his knee a flat plate of black iron, no longer than his forearm, lacquered along the edge, shaped like a folded fan. He holds it above his head, two-handed, the way a man holds a roof beam against a quake. The blade strikes the fan. The fan does not break. The seated man does not break. The blade rises and falls a second time. The fan holds. A third time. The fan holds. The man swinging the sword is Usugi Kenshin, the most dangerous swordsman of the age. The seated man is Takeda Shingen. The year is 1561. The place is a field called Kawanakajima, and the doctrine that is keeping Shingen's skull intact is written in 4 characters on a banner planted in the earth 20 paces behind him. Fu, Rin, Ka, Zan, wind, forest, fire, mountain. You are about to hear the story of the only warlord in Japanese history who ran his armies on 4 tempos at once, the man whose banner was a doctrine, whose doctrine was a weapon, and whose deepest weapon was not the cavalry his enemies feared, but the stillness none of them could match. Every army that broke against Takeda Shingen broke because of the same 4 words. Most of his enemies could only count one of them. The 4th, the one painted at the bottom of the banner, the one that does not move. The 4th is the one that will end this story with a sword striking iron and the seated man not standing. Welcome to Will and Wisdom. If something in this one lands tonight, a quiet like helps another seeker find this fire. Share in the comments what landed. Another viewer needs your words tonight, so do not hold back. Subscribe if you want more of this each week. Now, the banner, the 4 characters, the mountain that did not move. Pull the camera back from the seated man and the iron fan. Lift it above the field, above the mist that rises from the Saigawa River in October, above the smoke of Kawanakajima at dawn. You will see, planted in the earth at the center of the Takeda command position, a tall pole. From the pole hangs a long banner of red silk, weather-darkened, the cloth heavy with mountain damp. 4 black characters run down it, top to bottom, painted in the brush of a court calligrapher and signed in the name of the daimyo of Kai province. The 4 characters read, in order, Fu, Rin, Ka, Zan, wind, forest, fire, mountain. Below them, smaller, the full doctrine in Chinese characters, lifted from the 7th chapter of a book that had crossed the sea from China nearly 1,000 years before and worked its way slowly through monasteries and military families until it reached the table of a Japanese warlord in the mountains of central Honshu, swift as the wind, silent as the forest, fierce as fire, immovable as the mountain. The book is Sun Tzu's Art of War. The chapter is the 7th, Maneuver. The line had sat in that chapter for 2,000 years before Takeda Shingen reached it. Other warlords had read it. Other warlords had nodded. Other warlords had carried on with whatever their fathers had taught them, which was usually 1 tempo, and one only, and that tempo was almost always the first. The wind, the cavalry charge, the rush. A doctrine is not a doctrine until somebody puts it on a banner. A doctrine is not a doctrine until somebody bets a province on it. A doctrine is not a doctrine until the men under its banner have died for it, and won under it, and learned the price of forgetting it. There were dozens of Japanese warlords in the 16th century who could quote Sun Tzu at a dinner, There was one who put 4 of Sun Tzu's characters on cloth and raised them above an army. Shingen did something else. Shingen took all 4 characters off the page, painted them on a banner, raised the banner over his army, and made the doctrine the operating system of every battlefield he ever commanded. The banner went into the ground first, before the tents went up. The banner came out of the ground last, after the wounded were carried away. Every retainer in the Takeda chain of command had to be able to see the banner from his position on the field, and had to know, by the angle of the cloth, by the order in which the characters were being lived that day, which tempo was being run, and which one was coming next. He was born in 1521 in Kai Province, modern Yamanashi, a mountain country between the Pacific coast and the Central Plains, a country whose terrain made cavalry both possible and necessary, a country whose lord had to fight on too many fronts to win any of them by force alone. His father, Takeda Nobutora, was a competent warlord and an unliked man. He had a reputation for cruelty even by the loose standards of the late Muromachi period, and he had nearly lost the clan twice through impulsive war with neighbors who could have been bought instead of fought. His son watched him do this for 20 years. His son did not speak. His son listened and waited and built his own quiet circle among the senior retainers, and chose his moment with a patience that already, at 20, suggested a man who was reading something other than the surface of the room. His son deposed him at the age of 21, without bloodshed, by political arrangement and the quiet support of his own retainers, and sent him, in 1541, into honorable exile in a neighboring province. The first thing the new daimyo of Kai did, after the exile was complete, was sit down in his father's seat and write a list of every province he would have to either ally with or break, and in what order. The list took him 3 days. He revised it twice. He showed it to no one. He folded it into a small wooden box, locked the box, and kept the key on his person for the rest of his life. The second thing he did was commission the banner. The banner was not decoration. The banner was a declaration to every man under his command that there would be 4 tempos in this army, not 1, and that any retainer who could only execute one of them would not survive the next 5 years. Wind, forest, fire, mountain. Hold those 4 words in your hand, the way Shingen held the iron fan above his head. They are not metaphors. They are operational instructions. Each one names a way of moving, or a way of refusing to move, and a master of all 4 is something no army before Shingen had ever faced. He turned his troops, over the next 30 years, from a respectable mountain levy into the most feared force in central Japan. He did it not by training them in the sword, though the training was excellent. He did it by training them in the tempos. Each of his commanders had to know which character on the banner was being lived at any given moment, and to move or stop accordingly. Each retainer had to read the banner before he read the field. Each unit captain had to know which character the day was being fought under, and to feel the tempo in his own breath before he gave any order to the men around him. Begin with the first character. Begin with the wind. The wind is the Takeda cavalry. By the middle of the 16th century, in a country whose terrain made horsemanship rare and difficult, the Takeda clan had built the most disciplined mounted force in Japan. Kai's mountain pastures bred horses smaller than the war horses of the Mongol plains, but tougher, more sure-footed in steep country, and trained from foalhood to carry an armored rider through narrow passes and broken ground. The Takeda riders, the Akazone, the Red Guard, the corps under Yamagata Masakage, wore lacquered armor dyed entirely red, an unmistakable wall of color that rose from the Takeda line like a flag of its own. When the wind tempo was called, the Akazone moved. The cavalry struck not in the slow, ritualized charges of older samurai warfare, but in fast wedges, hitting the enemy line at its softest seam and rolling through. The horses were trained not to flinch at the sound of arquebus fire. The riders were trained not to break formation for personal duels. The wedge moved as a single body, found the soft point, and broke through it before the enemy line had time to close. You can see the wind clearly at Mikitagahara, December 1572, a frozen plain west of Hamamatsu Castle. Tokugawa Ieyasu, then a young vassal of the Oda alliance, had taken his 30,000-man force out of his castle against the advice of every senior retainer he had to meet Shingen on open ground. He should not have. Shingen had brought 28,000 men, including the full Akazone. The Tokugawa line, drawn up in the Kakuyoku, crane's wing formation, was struck on the flank by the Red Guard at the moment the wing began to bend. The line collapsed in under an hour. Ieyasu fled the field on horseback, lost his bowels on the way back to his castle from terror, and famously commissioned a portrait of himself in that state of fear, which he kept in his private quarters for the rest of his life, as a reminder of the day the wind taught him what a real cavalry charge looked like. That was Shingen's wind, swift, concentrated, final. The Akazone did not waste their charges. They did not commit unless the wind tempo had been called by the doctrine of the day. When the call came, they moved like weather. When the call did not come, they sat their horses in absolute silence, watching the field, and waited for the next character on the banner to be invoked. The wind is the easiest of the four tempos to admire. It is the tempo of motion. It is the tempo of force visibly applied. A young man, watching the Akazone break the Tokugawa wing at Mikitagahara, would see only the wind, because the wind is what shows. The wind is what the chronicler describes. The wind is what the painter paints. The other three tempos are quieter, and they happen in less visible places. In the woods at midnight, in the line that holds when it should break, in the chair where a man does not stand. But the wind is what the world sees, and so the wind is what the young man trains. The young man buys the horse. The young man buys the sword. The young man buys the lacquered armor. He learns the wedge. He learns the charge. He goes to his first engagement, and if he is lucky, he survives it, and if he is unlucky, he dies inside the first quarter hour, having been a wind that struck nothing but the open air. Shingen's wind worked because Shingen's other three tempos protected it. The wind came out of the forest. The wind was followed by the fire. The wind was anchored behind the line by the mountain. Take any one of those three away, and the wind becomes the dispersion that has killed more young warlords than the sword. The Akazone did not gallop into open ground. The Akazone galloped out of a stand of pines where they had been silent for 6 hours, into a softened seam that the forest had read for them, and they galloped knowing that the fire behind them and the mountain behind the fire would still be there when they returned. That is what made them weather. That is what made them more than cavalry. Which brings us to the second character, the one that comes after wind, on the banner, and the one that almost every other army of the age would have skipped past as decoration. The forest, Rin, silent as the forest. This is the tempo most armies cannot hold. The forest, in Shingen's doctrine, is the encamped army. It is the army that has stopped moving and is invisible. It is the discipline of an entire fighting force going to ground inside a stand of pines or a fold of hills, lighting no fires, speaking no words above a breath, sleeping in armor, and remaining there, sometimes for 2 days, sometimes for 5, while the enemy moves past or settles into a position the encamped army has already mapped. In the standard armies of Sengoku Japan, this was nearly impossible. Foot soldiers were peasant levies. Peasant levies talked. Peasant levies laughed. Peasant levies lit fires for tea because they were cold, and tea in a Japanese army was a near sacrament. Peasant levies, packed into a forest at dusk, made the kind of noise that any competent scout could hear from a quarter-mile off. Shingen's army did not. He had spent 15 years training his soldiers to the forest tempo. The training was simple in description and brutal in execution. Units were marched into the mountains in full gear, ordered to find a position, ordered to remain silent, and ordered to remain still, for periods measured first in hours, then in days. Officers who allowed their men to speak were demoted. Men who broke ranks for water were beaten. Men who broke ranks for fire. And there were not many after the first year were not seen at the next muster. The penalty for being heard by a Takeda scout during a forest drill was that the unit was marked. Marked units fought first in the next battle. Marked units took the cuts the rest of the army did not take. Marked units learned the hard way that silence was a discipline that cost less than the alternative. By the time the Akazone took the field at Mikatagahara, the Takeda forest could swallow 10,000 men in a stand of pines and let a Tokugawa scouting party walk past at 50 paces without a single horse snorting at the wrong moment. The forest tempo was not stillness for its own sake. The forest tempo was the invisible reservoir from which the wind tempo struck. Without the forest, the wind had nowhere to come from. Every cavalry charge the Akazone ever made was preceded by a period of forest, sometimes brief, sometimes long, always disciplined, in which the army was to the enemy simply absent from the map. This is the tempo that broke Usugi Kenshin's scouts in the run-up to the fourth battle of Kawanakajima. Kenshin's reconnaissance had located the Takeda army on Saijo-san, the high ground southeast of the plain. 2 days later, when Kenshin moved his force off Mount Saijo to meet them in the dawn, the Takeda army was no longer on the mountain. They had risen in the night, in absolute silence, marched down the back slope, crossed the Chickamauga River by a low ford, and taken up position on the plain itself, directly between Kenshin and his line of retreat. Kenshin's scouts had missed the movement entirely. They had heard nothing. They had seen nothing. An army of 18,000 men had moved past them, in the dark, like a stand of pines slipping its roots and walking into a different valley, silent as the forest. There is a deeper truth in the forest tempo that the chronicles do not say out loud. The men who could hold the forest were the men who had nothing they needed to say. They were not silent because they were ordered to be silent. They were silent because they had been trained over years into a kind of inner economy in which the running commentary that fills most men's heads, the rehearsal of grievances, the imagined arguments, the future speeches no one will ever hear, that internal noise had been ground down to nothing. The forest outside the army was possible because the forest inside each soldier had already been built. A man whose mind is loud cannot keep his mouth quiet for 2 days in a stand of pines. A man whose mind is a stand of pines does not need to keep his mouth quiet. The mouth follows the mind. The forest tempo was, before it was anything else, a discipline of the interior. Now, the third character, the fire. The fire is the engagement. The fire is the moment the forest is finished, and the wind is over, and the contact has begun. Fire in Shingen's doctrine is the tempo of full commitment. When the call was fire, the army gave everything. No half measures, no held reserves except those held for the mountain. The fire tempo did not retreat. The fire tempo did not negotiate. The fire tempo burned through whatever was in front of it until it had reached the bone of the enemy formation, and then it burned through the bone. The 4th Kawanakajima, October 18, 1561, is the fire of the entire Takeda Chronicle. The 4th Kawanakajima is also where the mountain, the last character on the banner, appeared in flesh and bone, in a camp chair with an iron fan. The plain of Kawanakajima sits at the junction of the Saigawa and Chikumagawa rivers in northern Shinano. Between 1553 and 1564, the Takeda and Usugi armies fought across this plain 5 times. Most of the engagements were inconclusive. The 4th, the one fought in October of 1561, was different. It was the bloodiest battle of the Sengoku period to that date, with combined casualties of nearly 8,000 men in a single day. Shingen's plan for the 4th battle was a doctrine in motion. He had taken the high ground at Seijo-san with 16,000 men. Kenshin had brought 13,000 into the field opposite. Shingen's strategist, Yamamoto Kansuke, the one-eyed, one-legged tactician who had advised Shingen for 19 years, proposed a maneuver called Kitsutsuki no Senpo, the woodpecker strategy. A detachment of 12,000 Takeda troops would climb Mount Saijo at night, surprise the Usugi camp at dawn, and drive them down onto the plain, where Shingen, waiting with the remaining 8,000, would catch them in a hammer and anvil and finish them. The plan was elegant. The plan failed. Kenshin's scouts, in a rare moment of correct reading, had seen the campfire pattern on Saijo-san thin out toward the rear in the evening, and Kenshin had guessed, correctly, what was being prepared. He moved his entire army off the mountain in the dark, crossed the Chikumagawa by the Amanomiya Ford, and at dawn arrived on the plain, not driven, marching in order. In the morning mist, Shingen, on the plain with 8,000 men, found himself facing the full 13,000 of the Usugi force 2 hours earlier than expected, with his hammer still on top of an empty mountain. This was the moment the fire tempo was called. The Takeda command did not panic. There was no retreat order. There was no attempt to wait for the woodpecker detachment to return. Shingen rode along his line and called the fire, the full commitment. Every man forward, every reserve except the personal guard around the command position. The Takeda army of 8,000 engaged the Usugi army of 13,000 head-on in the mist. The fight that followed has been described, in every chronicle that records it, as a furnace. There was no maneuver. There was no flank. There was only the line, and the cut, and the smoke, and the bodies stacked where they had stood. For 2 hours, the Takeda line held against an army half again its size. The Usugi pressed forward in a kuruma gakari, wheel formation, fresh units rotating into the front line as the previous ones tired. The Takeda fire burned hot enough to make even that wheel slow. But slow is not stopped. By mid-morning, the Usugi center had pushed through. A column of Usugi cavalry, led personally by Kenshin himself, broke through the Takeda command screen and reached the Hunjin, the personal command position, the cluster of banners and stools in lacquered chests where the daimyo sat to direct the battle. This is where the fire ends and the mountain begins. Shingen was in his camp chair when Kenshin's column broke through. He was 40 years old. He was wearing a jimbaori, the loose battle surcoat, over his armor. He was holding on his lap an iron war fan. The fan was not ceremonial. It was a tesson, a folded plate of black iron lacquered along the edge, the size of a forearm, weight roughly 1.5 pounds. The tesson was a tool of command, used to signal units, to point, to direct, and a weapon of last resort. The grip on a tesson is two-handed when it is being used as a shield. Shingen had been using his on this morning, before Kenshin arrived, to point. A horseman in white-trimmed armor and a white cowl rode out of the smoke and broke into the command position. The horseman was alone. His personal guard had been cut off behind him in the press. The horseman saw the man in the camp chair and the Jinbori surcoat and understood instantly who he was looking at. He drew his sword, a long tachi, and brought it down toward Shingen's head from horseback. Shingen did not stand. He lifted the iron fan in both hands above his head. The tachi met the iron. The fan held. The horseman swung a second time. The fan held. A third time. The fan held, and now Takeda guards, recovering from their shock, were converging on the horseman from 3 sides. The horseman wheeled his mount, took a final cut at the seated daimyo, which the fan again absorbed, and rode out of the honjin into the mist, his cowl undisturbed. The horseman was Usugi Kenshin. The seated daimyo did not move. The mountain that did not move. 8,000 Takeda were engaged in the fire, 200 yards forward, dying to hold the line. The doctrine on the banner above the command position said Fu, Rin, Ka, Zan. The first 3 were being lived by the troops in the fire. The 4th was being lived, alone, by the man in the chair. The fan held. The mountain held. The horseman rode out. The battle moved on. The chronicle that preserves this moment, the Koyo Gunkan, compiled by Shingen's own retainers in the years after his death, records the encounter in 2 brief, almost reluctant paragraphs. The chroniclers do not dramatize the fan. The chroniclers do not dramatize the chair. The chroniclers understood, in a way that the modern reader has to be told, that the entire teaching of their Lord was held in those few seconds, and that to overtell the moment would be to drown the teaching in the noise of the telling. So they wrote it short. The horseman rode in. The seated daimyo lifted the fan. The fan held 3 blows. The horseman rode out. The seated daimyo was wounded only lightly, 1 cut on the shoulder, 1 on the upper arm, both through the surcoat, and he did not lose his command of the field. The 8,000 Takeda below the honjin held the fire until the woodpecker detachment finally descended the back of Mount Saijo and struck the Usugi rear. The battle ended at midday. Both sides claimed victory. Both sides had reason to. But the image that survived, the image that the Koyo Gunkan takes the trouble to preserve, is not the wedge that broke the Uisugi rear. It is the seated man and the iron fan, you. Listen to, there is in every life you will live, every meeting, every confrontation, every season of pressure, a moment when something fast and bright and dangerous breaks the command screen and comes for the central position. The instinct is to stand. The instinct is to move. The instinct is to draw. The instinct is to make some gesture that proves to the room and to yourself that you have not been overrun. The instinct is to do anything, anything at all, that breaks the unbearable stillness of the chair you are sitting in. Shingen did not stand. The horseman who rode into the honjin, expecting to find a warlord on his feet, sword half drawn, was given instead a seated man with a piece of iron and the still face of a mountain. He could not press the attack into that. He could swing 3 times. He could not break what the seated man was demonstrating. which was that no movement was required. A mountain does not move because it does not need to. A mountain does not move because the field is the mountain, and the mountain is the field, and the swordsman riding through the mist is going to ride past in a moment, and the mountain is going to still be there. A mountain does not move because the wind, the forest, and the fire are the other three tempos of the same army, and they are doing what they were trained to do 200 yards forward, and there is no need, none, for the mountain to participate in their work. The mountain holds. The mountain anchors. The mountain is the reason the other three tempos can be deployed at all. Wind without mountain is dispersion, the cavalry charge that runs out of ground and momentum and ends, scattered, on the wrong side of the field. Forest without mountain is hiding. The army that goes silent because it is afraid, not because it is patient. Fire without mountain is fury. The engagement that consumes the line and leaves nothing, no reserve, no command, no continuity when the engagement is done. The mountain is the thing that makes the other three usable. Most men know one tempo. They are the wind, always. The men who charge every meeting, every conversation, every decision. They strike first and hardest, and most of them are gone, exhausted, by 40. They mistake motion for progress. They mistake noise for command. They mistake the speed of their own response for the depth of their own position. A few men, more disciplined, know two, the wind and the forest, the charge and the weight. They are formidable. They are rare. They run companies. They write books. They have learned, somewhere along the way, that the cut withheld is often the cut that mattered. And they have learned to sit in a stand of pines for an hour, a day, a week, until the seam in the enemy line shows itself. A very few know three. They have learned the fire as well, the moment of total commitment, the day when the meeting becomes a furnace and they burn through what is in front of them and reach the bone of the matter. They are dangerous. They are the kind of person a competent rival begins to map carefully, because 3 tempos is enough to run a campaign, and a campaign in the right hands becomes an empire. Shingen had 4. The 4th was the one his enemies could not match. The 4th was the one painted at the bottom of his banner. The 4th was the one that sat in the chair while the tachi came down. The 4th was, in some sense, the one that made him a man whose name has outlasted the names of warlords who outfought him on individual fields. Kenshin won as many battles. Nobunaga won more. Hideyoshi inherited the country Nobunaga began. Ieyasu finished the work and held it. But the banner that is still copied, the doctrine that is still taught in business schools and military academies, the 4 characters that are still painted on the gates of country estates in the mountains north of Tokyo, those are Shingen's, because Shingen put on the cloth the one tempo most warlords could not even name. The 4th one, the one that is not motion, the one that the chair holds. Wind, forest, fire, mountain. Carry the 4 characters home with you. Hold them in your hand. They are not exotic. They are not ancient. They are operational, and they are usable, and they have a hierarchy. The wind is the charge, the call you make, the decision you announce, the first move into a new room. The forest is the silence, the listening, the waiting, the disciplined refusal to speak before the moment has named itself. The fire is the commitment, the engagement that gives everything, the meeting where the half measures end and the line is held until the line is through. The mountain is the seat, the part of you that does not move whether the other 3 are deployed or not, the part that the room reads even before you speak. the part that holds when something fast and dangerous rides into the command position with a sword half drawn. You will spend your life learning all four. You will spend the first half of it mostly being the wind, because that is the tempo a young man can feel in his blood. You will spend the next quarter learning the forest, because the forest is what you must learn after the wind has cost you too much. You will spend a few hard, defining seasons in the fire, and you will know in the years afterwards which ones they were and which ones they cost. And then, somewhere late, if you are paying attention, you will discover the mountain, the fourth tempo, the one that does not require you to do anything but hold. The mountain is the man who has nothing to prove. The mountain is the seated daimyo with the iron fan. The mountain is not aggression, and it is not passivity. It is a third thing the modern vocabulary barely has a word for. It is the quality of a presence that does not require the room to acknowledge it in order to know that it is there. A mountain does not need to be seen to be a mountain. The mountain is a mountain whether the field below it is full of armies or empty of them. The mountain is a mountain whether the sky above it is clear or dark with smoke. The mountain holds its own weight without any reference to whether anyone is watching. It is, in the most literal sense, self-anchored. And a man who has become, in his own life, even a small mountain, a fraction of the doctrine, a foothill of the principle, is unmistakable to everyone who walks into the room he is in. They do not always know why. They cannot always name it. They only know that something in that man does not move, and that the thing that does not move is not stubbornness, and not pride, and not fear, but a settled weight that the rest of the room can either lean against or break against, and which will be exactly the same in either case. The mountain is Bokuden on his boat, the same archetype, 400 miles south, holding an oar instead of a fan, but the same stillness, the same refusal of movement, the same understanding that the central thing did not need to stand. The mountain, in the lineage of these stories, is the figure who knows that the field is already his, and that the rider in the mist will pass. Shingen lived 12 more years after the fourth Kawanakajima. He continued to deploy the four tempos with discipline. He continued to win battles. He continued to expand the Takeda holdings until the dying year of 1573, when a stray bullet, or by some accounts an illness, took him during the siege of Noda Castle. He was 52. He died on a litter on the road back to Kai, having instructed his commanders to conceal his death for 3 years, so that the doctrine, the banner, the four characters, the operating tempo of the army could continue to do its work without the enemy knowing that the seat under the surcoat was empty. They obeyed him for 2 of those 3 years. The deception held until 1575. The doctrine, in the hands of his successor, did not. His doctrine, painted on the banner, outlived him by less than a decade. His son Katsuyori, who knew the wind and the fire but had never learned the forest or the mountain, charged the wrong field at the wrong time at Nagashino in 1575 and broke the Takeda cavalry on Oda Nobunaga's matchlock lines. The clan never recovered. The lesson, of course, is in the failure of the son as much as the success of the father. A man who knows 2 tempos can hold for a generation. A man who knows 4 is what we are still reading about, 450 years later, in books like this one. Wind, forest, fire, mountain. The banner stands in the earth at dusk. The plain of Kawanakajima is empty now. The Saigawa runs cold. The 4 characters on the red silk, blackened by mountain damp and battlefield smoke, sit one above the other in the last of the light. Most men, in their whole lives will master one of those tempos. A few will master 2. The disciplined will master 3. The masters, the ones the chronicles preserve, the ones whose banners are still copied by calligraphers who do not know what they mean. The masters had 4. Master 1 tempo, and you can fight. Master 2, and you can lead. Master 3, and you can win. Master 4, and you are no longer a warrior. You are weather. You are the field itself. You are the mountain that did not move.